This show is sponsored by Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den 10, you're giving back on a global scale. Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. My guest today is a dancer, an artist, an inspiring leader, and so much more. She has been in sales since she was a little girl, following her dad around in his commercial real estate business. Soon, she became the sales and marketing lead for her husband's business, Tourmaline Enterprises. But when he passed away in 2015, she made a decision to take over and become CEO. At the time, the business was in decline. Under her leadership, she grew the company by over 350%. Today, she prefers the title of CVO, Chief Visionary Officer. Please welcome CEO of Tourmaline Enterprises, Lori Raymond. Welcome, Lori.
Hi, good morning, Michael. Thank you.
Well,
wow, that was quite an intro. It's like we should wrap it up now.
It is. And I know that I'm butchering the name of the company, and I'm sure we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, you filled out the intake form, and for our audience, I usually have an intake form that I send out to all of my guests, and every guest responds differently. Some fill it out they copy and paste their bio, which I'm perfectly fine with, doesn't bother me one bit. They put a couple bullet points, cool with that too, whatever it is. And then there's some guests that take the time to share their whole life story with me in the intake form. And when I opened up your intake form and I saw it, I went, whoa. And I read through everything, and you really shared and took the time. And so just reading your story and everything else that we're going to get in, I felt that you deserved a little bit more of a unique, custom-tailored intro for yourself.
Wow, I feel really special. That was great. That was great. You know, when you think about if I'm ever up on a big stage, how would somebody introduce me? No, I'm just going to have, when I get there, you can be that guy.
I'll intro you. I'll be more than happy to do that. So you said good morning, and you know what I love about where my show has gone, and you and I were talking a little bit offline about this. When I first started, I'm in Poughkeepsie, New York, and when I first started, I had a lot of my chamber guests, my chamber friends come on as guests, and they're all local to me, and they would come here in studio and everything. And then as the podcast grew and I got hooked up with 10X Stages and other PR agencies, I started having guests from all over the country, more so the East Coast. I had a lot of Florida, maybe some Midwest. And then now I'm kind of like spreading my wings over to the West Coast, and you're all the way in California. So this is really, really cool.
It's very cool. It's very cool. My sister used to live in New York, and I'm thinking now, you're 3 hours ahead. It's like lunchtime for you, and I'm just having my first cup of coffee, and how great the world is these days with technology. I mean, I had a doctor his wife once said, the world is an egg, and she was from Brazil. And there's a crazy story that goes with that. I have a distributor in Brazil. And my late husband went to this doctor, and we found out through just a few questions that he was actually the nephew of my distributor in Brazil's aunt.
Wow.
Best friend, one of his best friends. Sorry, not his aunt, one of his best friends. And this doctor was her nephew. And it was like, okay, we're in California. This is all the way in Brazil, and how weird the world is. And when he ended up coming up here from Brazil, they had us over for dinner, and his wife said, the world is an egg. It's no bigger than that.
Right.
And you really realize the world is just shrinking because of technology,
Yeah. And tech,
expanding and shrinking at the same time, right? Because of all
right.
the
And,
technology.
and our social networks and all these different things. Like, I mean, even like this, like the podcast, right? We're getting to know each other through this format. And, who knows, a year or so from now, we see each other at a trade show and go, oh my goodness, I know you from the trade, from the podcast,
I know. Or hey, I know somebody in New York I can call up.
And that's right. Yeah,
Very
exactly.
cool.
Exactly. And it happens for sure. So you currently live in California, but you didn't grow up there. You grew up in Washington. And I would love to learn about your upbringing. I introduced you as a dancer and an artist, and I would love to hear about that passion and where it
Oh,
went.
cool. Yeah, it's funny, you don't really talk when you get to be this stage of life, you don't really talk about when you were so much younger, but thanks for asking. I had a really unique upbringing. In fact, my sister was telling me last night on the phone, you have to watch this movie. It's our story. It is our life. And I was like, oh, okay, great. Anyway, she started telling me about it, and it really is. So our life is pretty unique and yet pretty not unique, right? Kind of normal. But I grew up in a small town in Washington called Edmonds, and it's right on Puget Sound. So out of my bedroom window, you could see the ferry boats going out in the morning and going out to the Olympic Mountains behind and going out to these little islands. And off to the right is a very famous island called Woodby Island. And you could see that. And I had relatives living over on Woodby Island. But I mean, it's just like this picturesque, beautiful town. And very kind of almost Norman Rockwell-ish in some ways, right? But what made us really unique was my dad is Jewish and my mother is not. And now today, they have been married 69 years. So if you think back 69 years ago, there were not a lot of Jews marrying non-Jews or non-Jews marrying Jews, right? So, or any other inter-religious or interracial marriages going on. So those people always stuck out, right? Well, in the town I was in, my dad was one of two Jewish people. That was it. Yeah, you're in New York, so you don't know what that's like,
No, no, we don't.
right?
That is shocking.
Right. And
I went to
so,
Catholic school and I had Jewish friends
okay, yeah, exactly.
in
So
class.
nobody knew what we were. And my parents had always said that, you know, that they had challenges getting married, and so that they would allow my sister and I to grow up and make up our own minds when it came to religion and faith and all that. And years later, we both told my parents that that's pretty detrimental to a child. Like, kids need a foundation
Mm.
in you know our religion was the love we had. And so that was our foundation. And so in that way, we were incredibly blessed and lucky because my parents, obviously 69 years later, they bucked the odds and they made it, right? But so that made us a very unique family. And there was I clearly remember there was another girl in school who was Jewish. Her mother was Jewish and her father was Jewish. And when I really went through that seeking in my life of wanting to belong, right? I went to temple with her every week. Her family embraced me and said, "Come to temple with us." And so I did. And I did that for about 2.5 years. And so my father was very artistic. My sister was very linear in studies and athletic and that sort of thing. And I got into dance when I was very young. So I was, I don't know, elementary school age, early elementary school. And I took ballet, and then my mother had us taking piano, and we did all these other things. We were very, very lucky. And I just gravitated towards dance because it just made sense to me. I could express myself well in dance. And so I stayed with ballet and then jazz as I got into my teen years. And then I clearly remember when I was 17, And I'd never been there, but I started dancing hula. I know. I just saw your eyebrows raise. I don't know if your audience is ever going to see eyebrows raised, but that was a good one. Yeah, and so here I am in Washington, never been to Hawaii, and I just somehow was introduced to it and found what's called a kumahula, a Hawaiian dance teacher in the town I lived in, and it was a woman who had lived on the islands for years and came back and started teaching out of her home. And I fell in love with it. And that really took me down a path of more um, uh, ethnic type dance. I took belly dancing and I danced, hula. And to this day, I still dance hula.
Oh,
If I
wow.
go if I go to Hawaii, I go and I will find a hulau, which is a hula school, and I will, take a class or because I absolutely love it. You can dance it. You can dance hula until any age of your life. And being in my 60s now, and you don't need a partner. That's the other thing.
Mm.
It's very organic, it's very natural, and you don't have to have a partner to dance it. So, and then, I was in my late teens, early 20s, and my old ballet instructor, it was like the disco era. And she said, "Hey, let's start teaching some disco." So I partnered up with her and we put together a group of people and we would teach disco. Believe it or not, this was clearly in the late 70s. So I am dating myself. But it was a fun time. It was a really fun time. And we also put together a can-can troupe, if anybody knows what can-can is. So can-can is a form of French dancing where it's raucous and wild, and they used to do it in bars, and women would like raise their skirts and shake them and do all this stuff. Well, we put together a can troupe, and we would randomly just go into bars and jump on the counter and start doing can, and then we would wrap up our music and out the door we would go.
That is like such a fun adventure, I feel like, that you experienced through those times. Yeah, my eyebrows raised during a hula one because, yeah, it is unexpected. And I started thinking as you were telling me more and interesting, like how you said me being in New York and, of course, seeing more people that are Jewish. And I started thinking, well, you are on the West Coast, and I guess you would meet more people from the islands, which would make sense that you would learn about hula. And for me, I've really never seen a hula dance outside of maybe in the cartoons, or maybe going to a resort. Now that I think about it, you might see something like that. But it's very rare that you see it. To your point that you had said earlier of like picking up hula.
Yeah.
I am familiar with belly dancing. My aunt actually took up belly dancing. And I remember her doing it for a birthday party because we have cousins who are Lebanese, and so one of our uncles, as they're called, out of respect, of course, who's Lebanese. I think it was his like 40th or his 50th birthday. I was a little kid, and my aunt came out in the full garb, the belly dancing garb, and it was really cool to see her perform because she was doing it as kind of like a gig as well. She was doing it, so it was cool to see her perform the belly dance and to see all the beautiful jewelry and different accessories that come with it. So it was really cool. Something that we
now you're making
Go ahead.
Now you're making me like empty my secrets here. I worked in a Lebanese restaurant and belly danced there as well.
Oh my goodness, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'll give you a secret back then. So we. As culturally, we have Lebanese in our family, so Lebanese and belly dancing is part of the culture there. And so what we started doing when we got older, my cousins and my uncles and father, we would start getting like a guys' night out, and we would go to different Lebanese restaurants in the city, and it was a guys' night out for the Lebanese restaurant of the Lebanese food, because it's all that, it's not just one big meal. It's kind of very family style, and there's like little portions coming out. Many cultures do it that way too, but in terms of restaurants in New York City that offer it, it was something that we used to do, guys' night out, and we'd go to
Yeah.
a Lebanese restaurant, and of course the belly dancing is a big attraction for the guys, all of us included. So there's my confession for you, if it makes you feel any better.
I like it. I like it. That's a kindred spirit for me. I love it.
And we share some more things in common in that, I took ballet, my sister and I took ballet when we were growing up, and piano when we were growing up as well. And I think these different after school type of things that we were doing kind of helped develop us differently in school and learn differently. And I'm interested on your perspective of that, of, being raised with music and dance and the arts, not just in the home, but also being raised in a way where it's encouraged and taking lessons. And I'm interested in this because I think it plays out later on in life when we start getting into self-development and we start thinking about the things that you're doing with your team of the Grant Cardone University, in that it's more than just go to school, come home, do your homework. It's go to school, come home, do your homework, and why not learn about this? And so I'm interested in your perspective of that.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. So that's really a good question. Um, it started not just with my dance and all of that, but my parents really nurtured the love of the arts with my sister and I. And when you think about the era that I grew up in, which was the 60s and the 70s, and then I started raising children in the 80s, I I was exposed. It's so funny. So many things are coming back now that this questioning has got my mind going in some different directions. But out of that little town that we lived in, right? My dad worked in downtown Seattle, which was like 28 miles south of this town. And a lot of the kids that I grew up with and friends that I had, their dads worked either locally or they worked in the next town over. Not a lot of them worked down in downtown Seattle. My dad was in commercial real estate, as I told you. And so he worked in the high-rise buildings, and we used to go downtown on a regular basis. We would go down every Saturday with my mother to the Pike Street Market. Everybody's heard of the Pike Street Market, which is very famous. And we would go get our fresh produce and fresh fish, and that's where Starbucks started, right? Starbucks used to only sell beans. They never sold brewed coffee. They used to just sell the beans, and my mom would go get the beans, and we and it was funny because being Jewish, we would get fresh bagels and go home, and our friends would come over and they had never seen a bagel. Like they did not know what a bagel was. Now you can't even walk down the street in New York and not know what a bagel is, right? But um, so so my parents, and I think it had to do with my dad working downtown, our social activities went there, meaning culturally, we went to the opera house and we saw ballets. And that was, I had a once a year date with my dad, and we would go to the Joffrey Ballet together. And that was a big thing for me. That was my day with my dad. And we did all kinds of other things. Of course, we went skiing and, different things. But that, I don't even know what he did with my sister. I'm going to have to ask her now. I can't remember. But so he was a big lover of jazz music. And so I was exposed to some of the jazz greats at an early age, and I would go with my mom and dad, and I've seen Stanley Turrentine and Chuck Mangione, and it just led me into a love of live concerts. I saw Johnny Mathis when I was like 17, something like that, 16, 17 years old at the Opera House in Seattle. And our friends that were in the town that I grew up with, it's funny, years and years later, I ended up going out for cocktails one night with an old high school English teacher of mine and had come back to town. We ended up going out for drinks one night, and we were chatting, and he said, there was a group of teachers, the ones that you and I are talking about, and he said we used to get together and we would talk about different students. And he said we all said there was something about those Yaffe girls. They were going to go do amazing things in the world. Like they just didn't belong in this town.
Mm.
And I was just blown away by that comment. I thought, why us? We weren't, but I guess we kind of were really unique that way. And
Mm.
my sister's extremely entrepreneurial. She worked in corporate America for years and years, but then just 6 years ago started her own women's golf wear company.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
I know. Like she's super accomplished and she's my shiro and I love that. And whenever I get stuck in business, I call her and I'm like, hey, this is what's going on. And because she has a huge corporate background, um, and in the garment industry, which is completely out of the
Hmm.
industry I'm in, but from her corporate background, I'll tap into her for advice. And now that she's a small business owner, she calls me for small business advice, which is kind of cool.
That's cool. I'm going to have her on the show then.
Yeah, she's amazing. She's amazing. Yeah.
That's really cool. And I think this goes back to my original question, and I think you answered it just beautifully in that it's that cultural exposure that helps open up. And when you're talking about this teacher looking back and saying those girls are going to go off and do amazing things, I think it has to do with that cultural exposure that you were exposed to, that I was exposed to, that so many other and successful people are exposed to. Now, of course, there's plenty of successful people who aren't, but I think it's just a different element. I think it adds a different perspective on things, and that's why I was so interested in that in your background. And it comes across.
Oh, thank you.
I,
Thank you.
well,
Yeah, and if you're curious, I think that goes back to curiosity and your question about, even training my own team and Cardone University is, my mom is 88 years old and she's fierce. Like she's fierce. She was a secretary for a counselor in the middle school system, right? So she was not entrepreneurial, but she was sort of that rock in our house, while my dad was off doing commercial real estate and all that. But my mother has always had this insatiable appetite to learn. And so she's 88. And the other day I got home, I went to go visit her and my dad, and she had a newspaper article and she had cut it out and stuck it in something she was sending home with me. And I get home and I open this and I go, there she is trying to teach me something new again. She's always reading and learning. And she was in her, 70s and going to the community college and taking classes on, music from the 30s and learning more about, composers and she's just a super fun, curious person. And I think that she instilled that in my sister and I. And I think that's what I try to pass on to the people that I'm leading is
mm,
that if you are always curious and always wanting to know more and learn more, your life is so much more fulfilling. It's so much richer because you're open. You're just open, right?
mm,
If you think you know it all and you go about life in this very methodical, I know it all, nothing else is going to faze me kind of mentality, you close yourself off to experiences around you. And I think, when you look at our lives and you're in New York and I'm in California, but from Washington to New York, you couldn't get two more different places,
yeah,
right? Culturally, you
yeah.
could not get two more different places.
Yeah, and it's like Tony Robbins says, if you're not growing, you're dying. And
Yes.
and I think about it very often too, in that, I do workshops and public speaking and developing your inner confidence type of workshops. And I think about that when if someone's there and they're not tuned in and they're not there because they want to learn or grow. I'm like, well then, this just isn't right for you because, it's all about personal development. It's all about growth, and it's not about what it's about what you can learn. And I think the other part that I'm trying to get to in terms of that statement there is, I feel like I love this other quote that I have on my computer. It's the teacher, I'm going to butcher the quote because I don't have it in front of me, but it's like the teacher can learn from the student, and the student can learn, the student can learn from the teacher, and the teacher can learn from the student.
Yes.
And what it means is like, what I'm thinking about in terms of the workshops of an experience that I had is that even if the person in the audience that I'm working with has more experience than me, has more knowledge than me, has more whatever you want to call it than me, if they're in a growth mindset, then whatever I'm saying to them, something's going to land with them and help them somewhere in their life. And that's who I'm trying to work with. And if they're not in a growth mindset and they're shut off to it, then they're probably not ideal for me, and something's not right because they're just shut off, to your point of like, they just don't want to grow anymore. Because you could learn from anybody. Like I learned from my daughters who are 6 and 8 years old. I learned from them.
Oh my gosh, that's who I learned from the most is my grandkids, And some of my mentors that I really follow are much younger than me. They have a completely different mindset at 30 than I did at 30, and they're entrepreneurs.
Right.
Like when I was 30, I was busy raising kids, right? And I always had a very entrepreneurial spirit and was always doing something outside of a job. I had a 9 to 5 job, but I was always doing something outside of that. And now I look backwards from a different viewpoint, right? And so I love learning from younger people.
Yeah.
I'm the oldest one in my office.
Yeah, and now, and to your point, in terms of like what you're just saying there of being the oldest one in your office, right, and having a younger staff, is that so important as you're building a business, and we're going to get into your business in a little bit, but as you're building a business, it's not just for now, it's for the legacy, and if you're going to build it for a legacy and for a longer term, then you got to tap into the next generation, and you got to appreciate and absorb them and take in what they're looking for and what they want, and not just what we want as the older generation.
Exactly.
So speaking of the older generation, you have piqued my interest, my curiosity, as you said, on your parents, because originally when you were talking about them, you said, 69 years married and everything. I said, oh, that must have been nice. But they're both still alive and going. 69 years of marriage. So I have 2 questions. One I hope is easier than the other. The first one, which I hope is the easy one, is what do you have planned for their 70th? What are you and your sister planning?
Yeah. Okay. Good question. We haven't gotten to the 70th yet, if you want me to answer that, or you want me to wait till the next question.
No, go ahead. Yeah. Is there anything? Go ahead.
We haven't planned that yet because in about 3 weeks, my dad's going to be 91.
Oh, so that's the big one.
So that's a big one.
That's huge.
That's the big one. The 90th was the big one. And now he's going to make it to 91.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. We've had a real, a challenge since April of this year. They came down from Washington for a visit, right? To visit my sister and I. And my sister had been up there most recently. I was up there for my dad's 90th, and which is October 14th. And she had been up there most recently, and after that said, they just can't travel on their own anymore. We're going to have to fly up and fly back with them. And it's too tough. And I said, okay, I get it. I offered to go up. She said, no, I got this, because she was going up for Jewish holidays for Passover. And so she flew back with them. And 4 days later, they were supposed to come to my house. And without going into the whole long story of it, they both ended up with COVID.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And my dad I picked them up and brought them to my house. She had something major going on and couldn't keep them at her house. So I brought them to my house knowing that they had COVID. And I'm like, got this. Don't worry about it. I'm going to take care of you guys, and put them in their room and all that. And started taking care of them. Within 24 hours, my dad was in the hospital. So it has been a very rapid decline since then, because my dad was walking a quarter of a mile to a half a mile every day before he came down. And now he's been in bed since April. So it's really been hard, because it's been one thing after another. And my sister and I had been trying to get them to move down for at least the last 8 years. But because they're so independent and because they're so stubborn and because it's my mother, the Swede in my mother, so stubborn, she was like, no, we are fine. We, in the same house that I grew up in from the time I was in the 7th grade, right? Anyway, they came down and he ended up in respiratory failure for COVID and then got through that, but was in the hospital literally for 5 weeks and then ended up going into a skilled nursing facility. Now I found this lovely little home about 15 minutes from me. The owners happen to be a registered nurse and a certified nursing assistant. They're a married couple. And they opened up this home during COVID because they were so frustrated with the medical system at the time. And they had both cared for their fathers at sort of end of life. So anyway, my mom ends up not only having COVID, but after that ends up with like 2 emergency surgeries. So they'll never be back in Washington. We've just gone up and are preparing their house to sell it. But the blessing is, because there's always a blessing, there's always something going on, right? That's good. We have my mom and dad within 15 minutes of me, and all but 2 of the grandkids are within 15 or 20 minutes, and great grandkids, and they're getting constant visitation and people are there. Now, my mom has a new heart valve. That was one of her surgeries. And she asked her doctor, how long is this valve going to last? And they said, oh, it'll last at least 10 years. And she said, okay, I'm going to be here until I'm 100. And we said, okay, let's roll. Let's go. So, and it's wonderful to go every night and visit my dad and play cards and sit and talk about what's going on with business and ask him, is this a good deal, Dad? Do you think this is a good deal or do you think it's not a good deal? And he'll tell me, well, this one's got more risk involved. This one's safer. What is your gut telling you? And I'm still getting advice from him at 91, and it's a blessing. It's great.
Well, my heart, of course, goes out to you, and hopefully, things get better. But on the other side of that, as you said, the blessing in all of that is phenomenal in being close to them and them being able to still talk, and you go to play cards with him and all of this stuff. And I'm just thinking, as you're sharing so much with me, how parallel our lives are, different times, different places. But it's so interesting in terms of like just going back to the whole ballet thing and the piano thing. And then we go into the parents. And so my parents, I'm up in upstate New York, which is about 80 miles north of New York City. And so my parents live in New York City, in Queens, New York, and they don't want to leave there. And now they're only in their 70s, and they don't want to leave there. Whenever they come up to visit me, they go, it's beautiful up here, Michael, but we have too much going on in the city. They dance and they do all this other stuff, and they love their life down there. And they live in the house that I grew up in when we moved in there when I was in 7th grade.
Oh my gosh!
And so when you said that, I'm going. It's incredible.
The world is an egg, Michael.
and you started with that, and I'm going to proceed a little bit further in that. One, I'm very hopeful that my life continues to be as parallel to yours with your success, and of course with your parents. And even though they're aging and a little bit more and sick right now, it's still just a wonderful life. And we're going to get into their life. That's my second question for you. But what a wonderful life to get into your 80s and 90s and have this determination to live into your hundreds. And so I hope that that's the same for my parents. But we also had an experience with my grandmother, very similar, of an assisted living, where we didn't want to get her out of our home and put her in a nursing home because she lived with us. We wanted her in a safe place, and we found a woman who was a nurse and had built a home for others because she had done it for her father-in-law. Similar to your story for your father. So I'm going, oh my goodness, I got to share all of this with her because this is crazy how parallel all of this is. And so, like I said, I hope that it continues in this parallel universe. My parents just celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. And so
oh, God love them.
I hope that they can make it to 69 as well. So I am very interested in your parents and their upbringing. And we're going to come back to yours because there's so much more of you doing commercial real estate. Well, you didn't do commercial real estate, but you tagging along with your dad dad, and there's a phrase that he said that I want everybody to hear from you. But I want to just kind of dig back a little bit more into their story, because I mean, your mother's 88 now, your father's going to be 91. What their upbringing must have been something interesting as well, to get them to commercial real estate and into education and learning. And you're spreading your arms, going, they couldn't be further from. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, they were like polar opposites. Polar opposites. My hands are going apart because they're just so opposite, and I don't know how they ever met and how this ever happened. And that's the beauty of travel and curiosity in the world, right? So my dad is Russian Jew and born in Montreal, Quebec. So he's Canadian. I mean, it just gets so much more intricate and interesting. His father used to own 6 different shoe stores in Quebec, in Montreal, and it was called Paramount Shoes. And my dad is one of 2. He had a younger brother who was 8 years younger than him, and his mother was very. My grandmother was a worker. Like, she was always in retail, and she was always working, and she came from more of a wealthier background than I believe his father did. Don't know much about his father, my great grandfather, because he actually committed suicide when my dad was 8. And the story that we've been told, or that we believe, is that he had gotten into some financial trouble in business and had taken out some loans and was probably struggling to pay those loans back and did not know how to do it and committed suicide. And my father didn't even remember this or know this until he was in his 40s, and he was in some therapy and did some regressive type work, and this is what came out. And he had always been told that his dad was away on a business trip and had a heart attack. So it wasn't until he went and confronted his mother, who my grandmother had moved from Montreal, Quebec, when she remarried. She moved with my dad and his brother, who was 8 years younger. As I said, the first they went to Chicago, then they went to California, then they went up to Vancouver, British Columbia. They lived there. Then they came back to California. So high school years, my dad went to Hollywood High. And there's stories there too. So anyway, she ultimately landed in San Francisco and settled in San Francisco, right on Lombard Street. The Crooked Street, the famous Crooked Street in San
interesting.
Francisco. Yeah. And my dad finished school and went into the military and was up in Washington. This was during the Korean War, and my mom and dad met at a USO. My mom was otherwise engaged to another man who was in the Army, who was in Korea, and it kind of was expected from the families that she and this guy would marry and all of that. And she met my dad, and they fell in love. And she said, and she was very young. She was 18 years old. And she said she would never write a Dear John letter because, it was wartime and different things and she said, I don't want to assume that what I'm feeling now is real until I actually see the person that I thought I was in love with. Right. And so when he came back, when his name was Bobby, when Bobby came back, my mom said she saw him and it was like seeing an old friend. And she knew. She just knew. And so that's how my mom and dad got together. And my grandfather, my mom's dad, I think the story is the first time that my dad came to the house, my grandfather met him with a shotgun at the front door and said, so I hear you're Jewish,
Oh,
like,
goodness.
and you want to date my daughter.
And what religion was your mother? Or is your mother, I guess?
Yeah, no, well, she sort of was raised in a Lutheran
Lutheran.
home,
Okay, yeah.
because
Christianity.
yeah, my grandmother was Swedish and my grandfather was Irish, English, and Scot.
Hmm.
So I'm a mutt for sure. I'm a mutt for sure. But and my grandmother didn't know what Jewish was. My
Hmm.
mother's mother, she didn't even know what that was. But it wasn't the guy that my mother was supposed to marry, right?
Hmm. Right.
So they were like not happy about this at all. And then my dad, his parents, his mother and stepfather didn't meet my mother until after my mom and dad had married.
Hmm.
And then they went up to Vancouver. They were living in Vancouver. And the first time my grandmother met my mother, who's no bigger than a minute, okay, I'm just going to tell you, she's quite small. And she said, well, I certainly hope you don't get any fatter because Harold doesn't like fat women. And my mom said, well, welcome to the family,
There you go.
And so, from adversity comes tremendous growth. And the amazing thing is that again, it was the love my parents had for one another that became the foundation of our family and brought everyone together.
Hmm.
When my sister was born, people finally started letting their guard down, right? Because she was the
Hmm.
first one. And for 2 years, they were married for 2 years before my mother's mother would come and visit.
Hmm.
She would sit in the car and my grandfather would go in and visit my mother. you know, and yet my dad and my grandfather became great buddies. And my dad gave the eulogy at my mother's funeral.
Hmm.
And my dad's mother became very good friends with my mother. And yeah, it was like, but they had to break down the walls.
It's we go back again to the beginning of our show that we were talking about being this world getting smaller and smaller with technology. And I think the blessing of this world getting smaller and smaller is that we're learning about other cultures and we're learning beyond the stereotypes. And look, the stereotypes sometimes are true, and that's okay. We can accept them for what they are. But learning about a culture beyond those stereotypes and understanding maybe where that stereotype comes from and then appreciating it is what is really beautiful about our world today. And back then it was a different time, and I think the thing that we realize is that you didn't know about others, you didn't understand their cultures, you didn't understand the differences, and a lot of assumptions were made without being able to really get a full picture of what's going on. And so I could just assume, based off of understanding certain parts of history, in that there was some assumptions of whatever it was and
Yes.
just using some simple things of taking our jobs or taking our this or whatever it is. And so therefore I'm going to close off. And it's nice to see that time was able to chip away at that and help everybody appreciate each other.
Oh, yeah. And then we were just this big, happy family. I mean, it was crazy because when I ended up getting divorced from my first husband, I remember telling my dad, sometimes it's hard to be having been raised by Ozzie and Harriet.
Mm.
Like, like we kind of had this utopian little upbringing, and my parents were very and are very sound in the philosophies that they had about how to raise my sister and I. I never saw my parents fight.
Mm.
Never. That was not something that they felt was necessary to do in front of my sister and I.
Mm.
That if there was something they disagreed on, they shelved that until we were asleep or not in the house or whatever. They would find their way to have their conversations. I just didn't see them argue.
Mm.
I didn't see them disagree. And when it came to discipline, my mom was more the disciplinarian, but they agreed. They always agreed. And so I think what is so confusing for kids is when there is conflict, parents allow, because kids can't articulate what's really going on. All they see is all this anger, right? And it's difficult for them to understand why two people are arguing. And sometimes it's necessary to have an argument to break through something, right? But they don't know how to work through that until they get older. So if you're exposing them to that all the time, that's why I think that's one of the reasons why we have such angry kids today. And I think kids are so unusually angry. I sometimes just want to go, what are you so mad about?
Well, I would also blame some of the shows on TV.
Oh, without a doubt.
The dramas. I actually, part of my whole inner confidence presentation has to do with removing habits that don't serve us and replacing it with habits that serve us. And one of the things I focus on, and I really believe, because I've experienced it in my life, is that by removing shows that have drama and violence and negative, just that negative storyline that pulls you back in for more, that dramatic negative storyline of whatever it is, murders and divorces and cheating and all this, all this bad stuff that trust me, I watched and loved, right? Like I was, when's the next episode, right? Right. When I went through my personal and continue to go through my personal development journey and decided, I want to say it was about 2 years ago that I decided, you know what, I'm no longer going to watch violent movies. And that kind of trickled into drama and other things like that. And so therefore I haven't seen a Marvel movie in a while, and so I used to go to the premieres. But I have noticed a change in my life and how I'm able to be more present in those moments of disagreement with my wife. And sure, we raise our voice and things like that, but then we also say, well, let's go step aside, let's go to the room, close the door, and let's talk. And we have the conversation. And the girls will come in and what's going on? You guys are arguing. Yeah, we're arguing and we need a minute and we need to talk. But it's a much different argument today than it once was. And I think that's one little piece. There's so much more, like meditation and all this other stuff, but there's so much more. But I do believe that, and I didn't believe it before, but I do believe that the video games and the movies and the shows
100%.
Play a huge role in it. And I will say that, this isn't just me being older talking about it. I mean, I used to have Call of Duty night with my buddy, one of my best friends. We had Call of Duty night. We would play Call of Duty till 2 a.m. And I loved that game. And I still, if I saw it playing, I'm like, oh, that'd be kind of cool to play again. But I also understand how it made me so desensitized to so many things in life, more than just.
Well, I agree with you, Michael. And I think that, there's good that can come out of it and bad that can come out of it. But there's obviously today, kids are spending way too much time on that screen. Right. We know that studies have proven that it's very detrimental to people in general. But it's the desensitization that I think allows kids to act out. And I say kids because anybody younger than me is a kid. But teenagers, young adults, all the way down to kids in elementary school that are kicking their teacher or doing something completely inappropriate. Well, they see these things on screen and they're animated characters and there's no repercussions. There's no consequences for it, right? For that bad behavior. They just see it over and over again, and young boys or girls who are playing things like Call of Duty or whatever, people get killed and then there's not a lot of repercussions that you just go on and kill some more, right? So I do think that has a tremendous effect on what's going on in our society today. And that we can go down that rabbit hole for
we're not. We're going to get back to you, but I will say this.
Thank God.
Oh no, we're going to get back to you.
But I do agree with you that that desensitization has a lot to do with what's happening.
And I will say this: I want to put a little ownership on the parents as well, because it's not necessarily just the screen time; it's what are they watching, and the only way you're going to find out what they're watching is if you do it with them. And so, my wife and I, we'll watch the girls' shows. We'll watch the shows with them. We'll watch the YouTube videos that they watch, and we kind of know what they watch, right? I mean, because they do tuck away sometimes and watch their own thing, but they're typically watching, and they're younger, so I'm fortunate in this sense right now. but music videos or art videos or different things, and different toy videos, and like, these things are crazy, but the unboxing videos. But where I'm going where I'm going with this is that they also watch shows that I think sometimes make the parents look stupid and things like that. And it's funny for the kids, and I get that, and that's fine. But we'll see the girls act it out sometimes, and we have to let them know, like, hey, look, this isn't the Thunderman. This isn't that episode, and you got to stop there. And then they're like, oh, that's right, Dad watches that with me, and he knows,
Right,
or we will cut it out. We'll say, look, you're acting a little bit too much like Nicky, Dicky, and Dawn, and you need to chill out. We're not going to watch that for a week because you think it's funny, and it is funny in that context.
Yes.
So I think the parents also need to be involved to really see what their kids are watching and what they're doing. And I think that's really important. I want to go back to your parents for a second here, because there was something in there that was very important. There was two things that I thought, of course, their whole story is tremendously important, but two things in terms of business that I thought were very important for our audience to kind of just talk a little bit about, and we don't have to go too deep. One of the things has to do with your grandfather's suicide and the business loans. And I think this is so important because we're talking, my listeners, our audience, the people that are going to find this podcast somewhere are somebody that is starting a business, that's an entrepreneur, or that works in a business with an entrepreneur or a business leader or an executive or whatever it is. And I think that when we get to this place of loans, of debt, of finances, there's a tremendous weight that's put on our shoulders, your shoulders, whatever it is. I think it's so important to understand the big picture of things and the reality of things because, look, I mean, there's a movie out there, right? It's a Wonderful Life. And what does he think? He thinks his life is worth more dead than alive. And so it's not a concept that's new to any of us of, I got this life policy and my family will be better off with the money. And so I think it's so important to realize the repercussions of that, and that, the finances, they don't make the person, and they'll never make up for the person, right?
Absolutely not. And it's the legacy of what's left behind, because I know my dad was so determined, and he's so driven. He's just that person anyway, which is an amazing thing because his stepfather wasn't that way with him at all. And this drive came from within him. And I think that had his father been around, they would have been a force to be reckoned with. I kind of write my own fantasy about that in my head, about had my dad really gotten to know who his dad was and been able to appreciate the entrepreneurial spirit that obviously he had, man, could they have done great things together. So I tap into that to do great things, with my dad and gain knowledge from my dad that way. But you get into business and, I don't know if I had mentioned this to you when I talked to you before, but I think so, that I had read something about getting rid of the 3 Ps.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so you need to get rid of the 3 Ps in your life. The first is that whatever you're going through is permanent. Nothing's permanent. Everything is changing. I always go back to somebody who I just adored was Bruce Lee, and, be fluid, be water. Life is always changing. So nothing is permanent. So whatever you're in, whatever that storm is, it's not permanent, nor is it pervasive. Pervasive is meaning that it's seeping into every part of your life. You allow it to seep in if you want to, but it shouldn't be pervasive, whatever you're going through. You can think, oh my God, my whole life is falling apart, when it could be just you owe money to this loan person, right? Don't allow that to seep into every part of your life. Compartmentalize it. And nothing is personal. It's not personal. It's numbers and it's business. So if you can get rid of the 3 Ps and eliminate those from your vocabulary and your mindset, how great does that open up your world? I mean,
Mm,
it just really allows for expansion in your mind because whatever you're going through, it's just compartmentalized into this small thing and you can deal with it that way, versus thinking it's, all omnipresent,
mm,
right? It's all over you, right?
yeah.
And and I mean, certainly there's exceptions. You end up with a terminal illness or something like that, and it does become pervasive. It does seep into every part of your life as you're dealing with it. But you know, and I can think of other things,
Yeah,
but
I
for the
do
most
remember
part,
you actually sharing that with me now that you went through the three Ps. I love that. Get rid of the three Ps. Nothing's permanent, nothing's pervasive, and nothing is personal. And I think that that's exactly why I wanted to bring this up, was because I knew you'd have some really great insight to share with everybody of like, look, if you're dealing with a hard time right now, whatever it is, financial, personal, whatever it is, I think that you dig into this and understand the idea of nothing's permanent. When you think about that, that has to deal with happiness too. So if you're in a dark place right now, just think about it. When was the last time you were happy? How long did that last for, right? It's going to change. Things change.
yes, they do.
And
Yes, they do.
and then the entrepreneurial spirit that you come from, and I want to get into your entrepreneurial spirit now of 6 shoe stores and having this string of shoe stores. I got to ask my parents because my mother came to the country through Montreal, and yes, yes. Yes, this we couldn't craft this podcast any better, could we?
No, we couldn't.
My mother, so she's from Haiti, and when she came to the States, she came in through Canada, and we have family that lives in Quebec and in Montreal, and so she came through in the States through there. And so
Yeah.
I'm interested to find out if she knows the shoe stores because she likes her fashion. She's
Sure.
a fashionista. And so we would, as little kids, would travel up to Quebec and Montreal when we were kids as
What a
well.
great city.
Yep. So I'm familiar with it. We used to go there all the time. Our cousins were up there, and my godmother lived there and everything. So it's very familiar with it. So I can't wait to find out about the shoe stores. But this brings me into your entrepreneurial journey, right? And I kind of always like to dig back into the parents, the grandparents, or somebody that was a mentor. And the reason for it is because I feel like as entrepreneurs, there was somebody who kind of laid the groundwork or planted that seed. And we may know it or we may not know it, but I feel like this was going on in your life of you have this grandfather starts these shoe stores, then your father is this commercial real estate mogul for what it is, right? And then, of course, you get into your own entrepreneurial journey of making and selling jewelry, and then starting to work with your husband in the business. And so I wanted to go into that now. I'm going to tee you up with just bringing you back to being a little girl with your little yellow pad and writing notes with Dad, and some of the lessons that he taught you on your journey.
Oh, wow. That's such a good memory. So, yeah, again, now I'm going to have to ask my sister, where was she on Saturday morning? Because Saturday mornings I would get in the car with my dad, and he had just started in commercial real estate. I was young. I was about 6 or 7 years old, so obviously too young to be left alone. And I would get in the car with him, and we would drive around, and he would find apartment buildings. And I did, obviously we didn't have the technology we have today. So I had a little legal pad and I would write down the addresses of all of these buildings. And we would drive around for 2 or 3 hours and write down addresses. And he would pocket a different area on Saturdays. And then what he would do is he would go home and start researching those addresses. Who was the owner? How long had they owned the building? Um, when was the last time the building had sold? What did it sell for? And then he would reverse directory and contact the owners and ask them, are you interested in selling the building? And that's how he built his pipeline. Now you can get, you know, list builders, and you can find all kinds of people that can help you, create lead generation, right? That's how my dad did lead generation back in the day. And we would have these great conversations while I was in the car, and I would ask him, questions about, well, Dad, why do you do this? Or why are you focusing on this area? Or he would say, I have a seller or I have a buyer who's really interested in like something that's 8 units or less. And so he'd be out specifically looking for 8 units or less. And I really learned from him that art of listening to your customer, understanding your customer and what their needs and wants are, and then how to go out and find it and deliver it, right? And that drive that he had to do his research. And then, in later years, he had more referrals and, didn't probably have to work as hard at his lead generation. But he was always very driven. And he always said that, he because he was on commission only. My dad was on commission only, right? And most people don't like being on commission only. They want that security, right? And I remember in the 60s, early 60s, when there was a big Boeing crash, because Boeing is a big manufacturer up in Washington for airplanes and huge, huge employer, right? There was a big crash that the airline industry went down for a while and they weren't building planes and all of that. And that had a big influence on the housing market and then the commercial real estate market and all of that. I remember there were 3 years that we were living on my mom's secretary salary, because my dad was really working hard in commercial real estate and it was a really difficult economical time. And we look back, and I think you could make it then easier than you can now because there wasn't credit. There wasn't the amount of credit that there is now. So people lived within their means because they lived based on the cash they had, right? All the way down to when we adopted a dog in the neighborhood that got torn up by a German Shepherd, and I brought this bloody little dog home and said, we have to save him, And I remember now clearly, because we had that dog forever, we took that dog to the vet, and the bill was outrageous. It was like $350. That was my mom's entire salary for a month, right? And my mom told the vet, please don't ever send a bill to my house. And don't call my house. And I promise you, I will pay you every payday. And she probably paid $10 a month, or $10 a payday or something. But she paid it off. You can't do that now. You cannot do that now.
Wow.
It's like you go to the vet and your dog's, got some ailment or that's going to cost $3,000. You better have a piece of plastic to drop down, right?
Well, I'm going to challenge you on that.
Okay.
You're going to like the challenge.
I'm
because mom taught you something. I'm jumping ahead here.
Yes.
I am jumping ahead here. But I think it's right here in line with what you just talked about with mom and what she did with the vet. You did something very similar as well.
Yes, I did.
With a distributor that was owed a lot of money as well.
Yes, I did. I did that to one of our vendors where I went to them, and you can find that. I mean, for sure, you can find that. But society as a whole today is built on this system of credit and plastic and so I think we will get into that. We'll get into that. But back to kind of that entrepreneurial spirit, I remember really at times wishing my dad was around more on the weekends as I got older, because he was always out showing property, or he would say, I have a buyer who flew in town from Vancouver and, I have to show buildings. But then when my dad was with us, he was very, very present for the most part. Now, my dad's a sports fanatic. That's the other thing. So he had season tickets to the Supersonics, and we went to basketball games. Oh, yeah. And then
did you go to the 96 finals?
No, I did not go. I was 96. I was way grown by that time and out. But no, I did not. But I I would go and we would kind of like flip coins who was going to go you know and I remember my mom was not really as big into basketball. I loved going to the live games because I loved it. I loved all the action. Um, and then my dad got season tickets to the Seahawks the first year they became a franchise.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and he had season tickets until he was in his 70s and he eventually sold those tickets. But it was either my mom went or I went or my sister went with him.
So
One of the three.
he would have made a Super Bowl then.
Yeah. Oh, my dad did not. My sister made a Super Bowl. I don't
Oh,
think my dad's ever been to the Super Bowl. But
but the Seahawks
yeah,
won during his time of owning the tickets, is what I'm thinking.
they did.
Yeah, yeah,
They did win.
yeah.
So I was not as big into football as I was into basketball because basketball is much faster. It moves much faster, and I really enjoyed it. And my favorite basketball player was Pistol Pete Maravich, and he
Ah,
didn't even play for Seattle Supersonics, but I used to love watching that guy. But anyway, so you had to love sports. Then my dad, and because of dance and art, I was off doing something else. My sister took up golf with my dad,
that's what she was
and
doing with him.
yeah, that's what she was doing. Not when she was little, but when she got older and that's how she ended up in this passion of developing her own women's golf wear company and she's golfed all over the world and then I grew up and later had horses and when you have horses you don't golf. So that's another story, but so my dad really instilled in me. I remember him clearly telling me at one point, honey, you can do whatever you want in life as long as you are willing to work, put in the effort, pay the price. You can have, do, or be anything you want in life as long as you are willing to do those two things.
Mm,
Work hard, pay the price.
mm,
And so, I think that always led me with my artistic background to believe that I'll always fall back on my own talents, no matter what life throws at me. I'll always find something to land on my own 2 feet.
mhm,
And yeah, I've worked for other people, but I've always done something on the side. I've always done something entrepreneurial. When I was had my first daughter and she's 40, I can't even believe I'm going to say she's going to be 44 in a few weeks. But she's going to be 44 in a few weeks. And she was an infant and I sold Tupperware. I was working at a lumber store and I sold Tupperware on the side. And then I knew that wasn't for me because it wasn't artistic enough. And then I sold Mary Kay for 14 years on the side. And I
mm,
would, teach my kids because when I had to go out and do what I was doing in the evening with doing a home party or whatever, I was taught by Mary Kay and her philosophies as a single mom, because she was, that you incentivize your kids to appreciate the fact that you're gone and doing something.
mhm,
So if they wanted a new horseback riding pad, because we bought their horses with my Mary Kay money, and we bought their all of their accoutrements with my Mary Kay money, and I would say, okay, here's your envelope. What is it you're working towards? Well, I need a new bareback pad. How much is that? It's $45. Okay, we'd write it on the envelope. And every time I would go out and work, they would get a percentage of what I earned for doing their chores at home and all that stuff. And then I would pay them. So they saw the value in me going out.
mm. I
You
love
know,
that.
they Yeah, they saw the value in me going out. And then, my sister took it a stage further with her own kids. They used to have what's called a tzedakah box, which is a Jewish tradition in the community. It's a charitable box. And you put money in it, and then the community decides where that's going to go. Well, in her house, they chose what charity they wanted to give to, and the kids would have to, they would get an allowance, but they would have to put a certain percentage of their allowance in the tzedakah box. So
Mm.
it taught them to give back.
Mm. I love that. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's really cool as part of this journey that you had in upbringing. And I'm not going to go into the parallels because there are plenty there for us in terms of my upbringing and my parents always
Sure.
giving back and nonprofit and all the different things. But it's incredible how similar. And I feel like you and I need to have a dinner after all of this. But
I'm ready.
I want to continue with your story here because it gets deeper. And as I made for you the parallel of like what your mom did and what you've done, I want to get there because I think it's
Let's
so
go.
important that people hear how you were able to overcome, of course, the death of your husband who had dealt with cancer for so many years. And then uncovering what happened in the business and what was actually happening behind the scenes that you at the time weren't aware of, but were able to overcome it. And I think you're sharing a lot of where this grit comes from, of learning from your parents and all of these different strategies and techniques that they used and to be able to get through things. And one of the things that I highlighted in my notes that I loved that you shared with me was that your father had said to you that the highest paid people in the world are in sales
Yeah.
and the lowest paid people are in sales. You get to choose which one you'll be. And I just love that. I actually, on my notes here, I have my full notes here. I actually bolded it out because I
Oh my
loved it.
gosh, that's amazing. Yeah, that's an amazing lesson and an amazing phrase because I asked him so often, what drives you in sales, right? And he always said the highest paid people in the world are in sales. But remember, the lowest paid people in the world are in sales as well. So many people get into sales because they're not sure what else to do in life, right? And then, oh, I'll take a sales job, right? There's a lot of people who are not passionate about selling. And if you think about it, we sell all day, every day. I mean, every time I want to go out to eat somewhere, I have to sell my husband because I'm telling you, the man does not like to go out. And I adore him, but he just doesn't he would rather me pick up food and bring it home, right?
My wife is the same way.
Yeah, and he's a great cook, and I love that. And I'm a great cook, so that all works out. But every once in a while, I really want to go out, you
Yeah.
know. But so we're always selling, and we sort of it, it depends on how you were raised, but a lot of times we have this tainted view of what
Hmm.
sales is because we've either had a bad experience with a salesperson or we know some kind of a creepy salesperson that is just not ethical and they'll do anything to get the sale or whatever. But when you really embrace selling and the love of solving a problem for somebody, sales is a natural byproduct.
Hmm.
It just is, and that's what I loved when I keyed into Grant Cardone's teachings
Hmm.
was that he hated sales. Now he's worth something like $4 billion and could probably sell ice cubes to an Eskimo with a
Right.
broken freezer. But it's so true. If you think that sales is yucky,
Hmm.
then of course you're never going to make money at it
Hmm.
and you're going to suck at it.
Hmm.
But if you embrace it and you love what you sell and you know that there's a need for it and that it's solving a problem, right? Um, the actual sale is the easy byproduct of it.
Mm. Yeah.
You don't even have to
Yeah.
work at it.
And I think what you said too which is so important is like, ethical, if you're ethical, and then you said something, if you love what you're selling too, right? So you're passionate about the product. And then at the end of the day, you care about your end user and caring about them means you're solving a problem for them and finding how your product helps them. Well, then it becomes easy. It becomes fun. It becomes less of a sleazy thing. And I think the
Or
industry.
hard.
What's that?
Or hard.
Work.
It's no longer hard
Right.
to sell.
Right. Right.
Sorry to
And
interrupt.
no, that's okay. And of course, it's like you said. I think that there are a lot of bad sales training and trainers out there who they just don't sell in a way that people appreciate. And I'm talking about the negative sale type of people.
Sure.
And that gives the industry of sales a bad taste, a bad rap, right? But the truth is that you have phenomenal salespeople out there who really care about solving a problem, and that's why they sell, and that's why they're successful. And I want to bring it back to you in that, before your husband passed in 2015, you were the sales leader of your organization. Of course, as the CEO, you still are, but this was more of your role. And so I'm interested in, I'm going to just kind of like speed us up here in that, you had all these different types of sales roles. You were doing this entrepreneurial journey. You were selling jewelry. You were selling Tupperware. You're selling all this other stuff. And then you meet with your husband, and he starts this business, and you become the sales arm. And so I'm interested in this. What you were doing that was, because also you were also overcoming some boundaries as well as a woman, and leading a sales organization. So I'm interested in this journey there.
So when I started with my late husband in 2008, I had been in the staffing headhunting world for almost 20 years by that point. And I had been placing architects and engineers. So in 2008, guess who got laid off? Architects. People weren't hiring architects, right? And at that point, my husband had just started his own business. And he said, "Why don't you come and sell for me?" And I thought, okay, this is going to be interesting, and it was. And I was always fascinated by manufacturing. I'd been in and around manufacturing many times. I used to be division manager of a chemical manufacturing company. And that wasn't probably in the intake form, but that was
no, a lot of what you just said was not.
Yeah. So, I love that everything that we touch, somebody designed and somebody had to manufacture. So manufacturing just fascinates me. So he was in this industry where we manufacture industrial equipment for barcoding and date coding on food and beverage packaging and pharmaceuticals, automotive, aerospace, you name it, anything you touch. And the easiest way to explain, as I think I mentioned before, is that we're sort of in this invisible field where you don't even know we exist until you grab the milk out of your refrigerator and you open it up and smell it and it's bad. The first thing you do is you look at the expiration date. That got there somehow, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the equipment that we distribute and sell prints those date codes. So that's what we do at Tourmaline Enterprises is we bring in finished goods from Asia, the UK, and Germany, and we sell through distribution, inkjet printers and the inks and supplies. We do some light assembly over here at my office, and I hold an HP license for engineering, so we can actually manufacture here and design here if we want. So he was in that business. He started his own business. I started selling for him. And for 3 years, he had me only sell the ink. He said, if you're going to learn this industry, the best way to do it is to learn the ink. So we were representing a very unique line of ink out of Germany, and we wanted to sell it into the HP OEM, original equipment manufacturing market. So my competitors today, I was calling on them, selling them ink. So it was great training for me to learn who buys these printers and where do they put them, right? And you put them on conveyor systems and you put them in production lines. And if you think about craft foods, let's just think about craft foods. Okay, maybe it's I don't know what craft foods makes now that I think about it. Okay, let's say it's a jar of mayonnaise, right? And you've got all these jars of mayonnaise coming down a conveyor system. There's a printer going to print an expiration date on that jar of mayonnaise. That's what these printers do. But the true beauty of it is, or the secret of it, secret sauce is marrying the ink to the product that's going to print on. because not every ink sticks to every single product.
Yeah, we've
So
seen
that's
that, the smudge. We've seen the smudge, or where it doesn't really, you can't see it
right.
very
It
well.
doesn't dry fast enough, or it's not dark enough, or
Right.
it's not, this or that, So the real magic is the ink to substrate and figuring out that component.
Yeah, because it's either going on
And if there
paper or
was,
plastic or
yeah,
glass or laminate.
glass or steel or whatever, right? And so that's the real magic there. And so I started with the ink. So I did that for like 3 years, and then I really became the face of the company. I was at all the trade shows, and people would come to see him, but then they would start talking to me because that wasn't his love. His love was not talking to the people. And the people who are in our industry still that knew him say you either loved him or hated him, and vice versa. And he was great with the customers, but he was hard on his vendors. So I learned a lot of great lessons from him. But to fast track this for the listener is that he did ultimately pass away in January of 2015. And alluding to the lessons that you think or that you're talking about, I found out very quickly that the business was not even solvent.
Mm.
And I got into the back end of the business and I thought, what was he doing? What in the world was he doing all the time? Well, I think he was more ready to retire and really was looking for that big thing, that big deal that would kind of give him that opportunity. And in the meantime, the economy had changed in 2008, so that wasn't a great year to be opening a business. So there became a lot of robbing Peter to pay Paul. And ultimately, I think that's kind of what got him when he became sick. He just sort of started shoving things in the corner and hiding them. And I didn't really realize, I was out doing what I was supposed to do. I was selling printers and ink. And so I quickly found out the company wasn't solvent. And we had about $175,000 in receivables that had never been collected.
Oh, wow.
What I know now, 8 years later, is that being an entrepreneur takes a lot. It takes a lot of grit, it takes a lot of guts, and it takes a lot of vulnerability to admit when you don't know something.
Mm.
And if you don't know it, you need to go find somebody who does, that is willing to teach it to you or help you.
Mm.
And I think that's the gift he gave me. I mean, I say, I can be bitter or I can be better, right?
I like
And
that.
I'm going to be better. And how I got better was realizing that when I'm not good at something, I better find a mentor who who is really good in that area and can impart the knowledge on me or help me get better, right? And he left me with the gift of being stronger today than I was before.
Mm.
Because when you lose everything, and I lost everything, I didn't lose the business, but I lost everything around it. I lost my home of 23 years. He had gone through everything. He'd gone through our retirement money. He had gone through, yeah, family trust money. There was money gone. It was gone.
So he was,
And
as you were saying, he was propping the business up, just trying to just dump personal fine money into it, whatever it
yes,
was, in order to just prop it up so that one day get that big sale to where it all gets paid
yes.
back. And so he was just,
Yes, yes, and Michael, I think so many people go through that.
mhm.
They think that big deal is right around the corner, and they miss building the foundation,
Hmm.
right? Because they're so busy looking for that big deal
Mhm.
that they're walking over small deals
Like you
and
said,
not recognizing it,
175,000 in receivables that were overlooked.
overlooked and not even collected on because he was such a nice guy, right? Okay, well, at some point you need to collect that money. So it took us time, but we collected every
Mm.
dime. We
And
we only wrote off $2,000.
And I want to say about, and stand to collecting for a second, because I think also as I've learned in my entrepreneurial journey is that sometimes we think, well, why wouldn't he collect it? That's easy. It's money. It's owed to you. But there's also work that goes into that as well, right? Collecting money. Go ahead, please.
There is, and he didn't want to put that job on anyone who was working with us, because then they would know we weren't getting paid. Right? So there was somebody who was doing accounts payable, but not accounts receivable. So it was like, well, where's the money? Right? So that was it. Oh my gosh. I used to tell my best friend at the time, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm living in a house of cards. It was this gut instinct. And I would ask him about it, and he'd say, babe, don't worry about that. Go do what you're good at. Go sell more printers.
Well, yeah, because you thought if you sell more. But yeah. I think it's important that we hear this, and that, and of course, if you're doing account payable, you need to have account receivable, but also it's challenging too, right? You have to call, just because you have somebody who owes you money, they don't always think about you. You have to call them. You have to stay on top of it. You have to, and sometimes the relationship, there's complexities in the relationship of maybe they're providing a service for you, and you don't want to ruin that by, whatever it is in terms of the collection, or maybe there's a value issue here of they're offering you something, and maybe so there's a lot that goes into it, and so I want to make sure that we're aware of that it's not as easy as it sounds to collect that, and that goes hats off to you, of where you said you only wrote off 2,000 of it, so more into the work that you ended up having not just uncover but having to do of calling these vendors.
It was a lot of work, and it wasn't me that was doing it. So the person who was doing accounts payable, I started saying, we got to collect this money. Like, I don't know what you have to do, but you've got to get a hold of these people, and you've got to start collecting the money. And of course, once you start reminding them, because they know they owe you money, they'll pay you, right? So that was a big lesson. First of all, is when people owe you, go get it. And then the flip side was the vendors. So really quick, I want to touch on what I did with the customers. I stopped allowing terms. Right? I took my customers to pay up front. And I had to. And that was hard, because I thought we're going to lose business. We didn't. We just said, due to current circumstances, we're going to need payment up front. And we had inventory, so we had to sell the inventory. So that wasn't the problem. But if it was a custom build of some kind, no, you have to pay up front for that, right? And so I changed those terms. And then what I did on the vendor side was I looked at all my suppliers, and anybody that I bought from internationally, so out of the country, I was always on pay up front. That wasn't an issue. But one of my vendors I was buying from, we owed them over $75,000. And I have like no money, and I've lost everything. And I'm like, how am I ever going to pay this person? So what I did was they contacted me and let me know that they were going to be in town, for a trade show, and wanted me to come down and go to dinner. And I said, I'd love to come down and meet with you. By that time, I had figured out what was going on. I figured it out. And I was like, this vendor is too important for me to lose. And so I had dinner with one of our other competitors, not a direct competitor, but I knew him, and he happened to be in town and called me, and I said, let's go to dinner. He knew my husband had passed away, and we went to dinner, and I gutted myself. I just told him, I owe this person money. I don't know what to do. I need to get ink. I've got to be able to sell ink to our customers, because it keeps production running, right? He said, Lori, you have to be honest. I went through this when my dad passed away. And he said, you have to be honest with him, and you have to let him know I'll pay you, but if you demand payment now, I'll be forced into bankruptcy and then you won't get paid. Nobody will get paid. Not what they're owed, right? And it was the greatest piece of advice that I ever got. And Roy, if you're listening, thank
Mm.
you for that. Because he said people are much more willing to forgive and work with you if you're honest with them than if you dance around the fact that you don't owe them money,
Mm.
right? So I readily met with the vendor when he was in town, sat down and talked to him, said, here's what's been going on. I hate to say this, I don't want to throw a bad light on my late husband, but I'm the recipient of unintended consequences here, and therefore so are you. So let's work through this, and I will pay you every dime I owe you, but I can't pay it to you all at once. And he said, I know you will. Just pay me every month. And every month we made a payment. And it took me a while. It took me a while. I'll say that. And when I paid him his last payment, I walked up and I handed him a check. And I'll never forget, it was $12,000. And he looked at the check and he said, are you going to be okay if I cash this check? And I said, I'm so okay.
Mm.
I'm really in a good place, you know? And I think there's value in taking yourself to zero, not using credit cards, looking at the numbers and just saying, okay, this is gonna, and it was a grind. I was in a grind. I worked 6 and 7 days a week for 3 years.
Mm.
We were flat. We didn't start growing. We did not start growing. And I had three people. And because I'm a visionary, I see my company with 100 people. I don't think three people's enough. And
Mm.
I don't think, the revenue that we're doing now is enough. We can do more. And we're good. We're really good at what we do. And we're great with our customers. And our mission statement is that we support the success of our clients with intentional solutions and unprecedented service.
Mm.
And we believe that because anybody can go out and sell a printer, right? Anybody can go sell a piece of equipment, but it takes somebody really special to solve a problem and create a lifetime customer.
Mm.
And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the company that wants to grow with us.
Mm. Yeah, and that specialness we're going to talk a little bit about in terms of how you support that. But I just want to go back here for a second on some of the hard things and that are so important for everybody to hear is that you handled this head on. You didn't skate the issue. I wrote this down because you said it. You said to this person, this vendor who you owed $75,000 to, I would love to meet with you. And we think so much, right? Like imagine you call somebody up who owes you money and they go, I would love to meet you. You go, wait a second, what? You would? Do you have my check? I think that there's so much to say about that of vulnerability, of authenticity, of just wanting to meet this challenge head on. That is so important for everyone to hear is that, you said it earlier with the 3 Ps, I think, of in one of those of like when you're willing to just meet it head on, it's going to work itself out. And you're going to be able to figure it out some way or another. The other part that I love about that is the honesty part. There's a couple things in there that are really great in that you met with a competitor, and we've talked about this on my show before about, competition is almost like a mindset, but there truly isn't competition out there. Everybody's going to go to where they need to be, and you're going to have a solution for the right person. And when you have that mindset like Roy had with you of like, hey, look, you're there and I'm here, and we have our own lanes and all this other stuff, and we might be competitors to the marketplace, but truly we're human beings to each other. And him sharing with you to be vulnerable and you being able to bring that to the table with the person that you owed the money to, I think is such another important lesson here in that, reach out to your peers, reach out to your counterparts, reach out to the people that you view as competitors, because the insights and the knowledge they're going to be able to share with you is obviously invaluable here. So I love that part. And then the next thing that you said here is about how much you worked and working 3 years and having flat sales. And I'm reminded of the story of the bamboo, of the the bamboo tree that is planted in the first year and seeded and watered, and nothing happens. And in the second year, it's watered, and the gardener takes such good care of this bamboo seed, and still nothing happens. And in the third year, still nothing happens. And then you go into the fourth and the fifth year, and all of a sudden, it's why it's called a bamboo shoot, because it shoots up.
Shoots up
to the sky. And when I introduced you and I made the claim of turning your company around 350%, that is the bamboo shoot. It's 350%. It went from ground zero, from nothing to 6 foot tall, right?
Yeah.
So let's go into supporting your team, because I think a lot of what you were able to do had to do with dealing with situations head on, of accounts receivable, of dealing with vendors, of changing terms, of doing some really challenging things that you had to have some tough conversations with people. But and then of course making sales throughout all of this. But the other huge component to this is that you brought up customers and you bring up the end user and making sure that they're taken care of, and service and all this other stuff. But who speaks to the end user is your team, is the people that are your direct reports, and how you support them. And so I will hand the reins back over to you after saying this, of that one of your longest standing employees have been with you since 2009, have seen all of the ups and downs. And obviously there's a support system that you've provided that people like that stay.
Yeah. So, and interestingly enough, that person happens to be my oldest daughter. So I'm going to flip and talk about the person who's been with us since 2012.
Okay.
So still before my late husband passed away. But my oldest daughter, honestly, I will say this about her. She has supported us. She has been through this with us. She had a 5-month-old baby when my late husband passed away. So the amount of stress that came upon her shoulders, because she was handling the financial side, but only what he was allowing her to see, was tremendous. And she sacrificed for years by not getting a raise. And I mean, she's a rock star. She is a rock star. She's the mother of my 9 and 7-year-old grandsons now, and she handles a lot. But to the person who's been with us since 2012 is my operations manager, and he was hired fresh out of tech school with no experience. And my late husband hired him. And his management style was, here's some books, read them, figure out how to fix the equipment. And this kid is amazing. So I always give props to him, because he's a first generation. His parents are from Mexico, and they didn't speak English. And he and I went to Quebec, bringing it all back around. This is funny. We went to go visit one of our longtime customers, and he had never really, other than Mexico, been out of the country. So I said, we're going to go to Quebec City and we're going to go visit this customer. We had a 3-hour drive from Montreal to the customer, and we're on the road. And I said, tell me why or how it is that you are so driven at your age to accomplish the things that you accomplish. Because he had a book on his desk that said, do something every day that scares you. Mm-hmm. And I learned, talk about learning from younger people. I've learned so much from him, because he said, well, my parents were immigrants and they didn't speak English. And he said, I had to help them. I had to be able to become good at self-study in school, because my parents couldn't help me. I had to learn everything on my own so that I could help them. And oh man, did that resonate with me. I was like, what a remarkable human being. What a remarkable human being. And he said, I know that I will have a better life because I am willing to put in the effort to learn the things I need to learn, to be better at what I do. And so every day I will stretch myself further, right? And this was early after my late husband had passed away. It was within the first year, I think. And I thought, okay, there's a lot of lessons here in that I can take away. And I just believed so much in him that as we began to grow, he would step up naturally and ask for more responsibility. He's our operations manager now, and he's 34 years old. And he and I butt heads constantly, just so you know. And that's the beauty, is that we also respect each other so much that, he can come in and he can say, I need to talk to you, and here's what I think. And I want you to think about that before you respond to me, because I'm very reactive, right? And and that's something that I work on all the time. And that's something that I've learned from Brandon Dawson, especially of Cardone Ventures, is that there is one emotion in business, and that's celebration.
Mm.
Otherwise, it's just business. Like, you should celebrate the things we're celebrating and otherwise keep the emotion out of it. It's business.
That's interesting.
And I have to remind myself that all the time because, this is like, it's a passion project and it's a child, it's a baby, and you're growing it, and you get so invested in it that if somebody comes in and they tell you something you don't want to hear, you naturally want to respond with, no, that's not how I feel. That's not how I think. Well, let's get the feeling out of it.
Right.
Let's take the feeling out of it and look at data. Let's look at data and let's look at structure and all of that. So we really learned to create core values that we instill in this company with who we hire, how they act, and if they fit. And what I mean by that is, if they're not in alignment with the core values, they're not a fit for us. And if somebody is not working within the core values and representing the core values of our business on a day-to-day basis, they find a way to get out of our culture, because it's almost like the ecosystem will spit them out, because they become uncomfortable. Yeah. Because everybody else is aligned, and when they're not aligned and they're trying to do something that doesn't resonate with us as a company, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And we've had and trust me, as a business owner, this is really critical for any entrepreneur to know. You are always going to be hit with the unexpected. Expect the unexpected.
Yeah.
As good as you can get at processes and procedures and following policy, the unexpected is going to hit you.
I feel like in my lessons with that, and it's just part, like, I look at it as it's part of the journey. And that sounds simple, but it took me a long time to understand that I would say to my coach, when is this just going to get easier? When is it going to get easier? I just want a day, I just want a week where it just feels like it's easy, or I just want to get, and not even a day or a week, I would say, I just want to get to a place where things are on cruise control, where I can just kind of like relax or whatever. And she would talk with me about it. And I think what I've realized by going through my own hardships and my own ups and downs with business is that, but that's part of the journey. If I wanted it to be easy, I could have just gotten a 9-to-5 as a cashier somewhere.
Exactly. Right. And I like to use that, Michael, in respect, because you're raising children as well. You always hear people say, oh my God, they're in the terrible twos, or they're, in the fighting fours, or whatever they're coming up with. Right. And I used to say, it doesn't get worse. It gets different. It gets different. Business you don't get to an easier place. You get to a different place. Sometimes it's a better place. Sometimes it's not. Right? but be prepared. Like, be prepared with certain things. There's some basic fundamentals you have to know about being in business. One is 24 hours a day doesn't solve your problems. You have to know that you've got to be able to shut it off and walk away, because tomorrow it's going to be there. And tomorrow there will be a different set, you know? That's why I always tell my salespeople, call them again, because you're no longer their priority today.
Wow.
Like, you have to follow up, because when you're talking to a business owner or a decision maker, some other priority just jumped on top of what you once were the priority. So you have to follow up and become their priority again. Right? And it's the same thing in business. So you have to know that 24 hours doesn't fix your problem. You've got to know that tomorrow there's going to be a whole, it's all still going to be there. The stack is still going to be there. It's might be different things in the stack, but it's still going to be there. So shut it off and walk away. That's what I learned after working 6 days a week for 3 years, right? Is that you've got to get to a point where your own personal sanity in life takes precedence over it, right? Or you have to figure out, does it make sense to walk away? The other thing is you have to learn how to exhale. I really found myself holding my breath a lot. And I'd be driving to work or whatever. And I'd realize I'd like passed 3 exits and I was holding my breath. And I really started studying breath work and learning how to exhale again. It's only in the exhale can you take in new thoughts and new ideas and fresh perspective, right? You have to learn to exhale that you're holding in. So that's another piece of advice that I always like to tell entrepreneurs, is that, these things are not easy, but if you practice them, they become easier.
Yeah.
And something you said that I just picked up on that I think we cannot overlook is you had a coach. You have to have a coach. There isn't a winning team on the face of this earth that wins without a coach. And same thing in business. You need a coach. And if you don't have one because you say you can't afford it, my advice to you is you can't afford not to have one. It will pay you dividends.
Yeah, it has for me. I think in terms of the coach, and I love that you bring up the analogy of like any winning team or every had a coach. I think, of course, finances is one of the things that come up. But I think the other thing that comes up is, well, what are they going to teach me, or what am I going to learn from them? And I think that there's two things to that. Of one, you will look for a coach that you can learn from, of course, right? And look for somebody who might know a little bit more than you know. I think that there's some value in that, of course. But I think the second part is probably the more valuable part, which is you're having somebody that you could bounce your ideas off of and that you can get some objective feedback from. And that is, like, to me, the most valuable part of coaches, because I think we'll find mentors out there, like I would view you as a mentor to me eventually, right? Of after this, I can probably reach out to you and say, hey, I'm dealing with this. What do you think of it? That's my,
absolutely
right? Of course. That's a mentor relationship. You could give me some advice. You know a lot more about different things than I know, and I can reach out to you. But to call you every week for an hour, you'd be like, hey, Michael, listen, here's my fee.
Yeah. No, that's good.
Right?
Yeah, because I don't, I look at a coach differently, just like you do. Right? There's a difference between a mentor and a coach. But this reminds me of one of my favorite quotes, for sure. When the student is willing, the teacher will appear.
Yes.
And you have to be in life. This goes back to my mother. Okay, I'm going to bring it full circle. My mother and my dad is, you have to be curious. You have to be teachable. And you have to be coachable. And those are things I ask in interviews. How teachable are you? Oh, I've been doing sales for years. Okay, but how teachable are you? Right? And if you're going to come in and just go through the motions of getting on Cardone University every day and you don't employ and execute on the lessons that are taught, you won't last here because you're not teachable.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be teachable.
Mm-hmm. It goes back to that audience member I was telling you about of, if you're looking at it going, what do I have to learn from you? Well, then we got a problem there, right? I want to stay with Cardone University and because something that you said in here that was important to me, there's a few things that you said in there. But, when you talked about it originally in your intake form as I was reading it, it was you're going through Cardone University. I was like, of course she is. She's a leader and she's growing and everything. And then you said, and it's so valuable to you that you've invested in it for all of your employees. And I think the and is even just as important, and allow for them to have 30 minutes a day to start their day by going through the training. The reason why to me that is speaks volumes is I think as employers, of course, we're going to invest in our employees, right? We're going to send them to the training program. We're going to send them to the trade show. We're going to send them to this. We're going to get them the coach, the mentor, if we're good employers and we can afford it, we will, right? All this other stuff. That's great. But we're like, do it on your own time. But you say, no, come in and do it on our time because that's how important it is to us. And so I'm really fascinated and interested in this mindset that you have.
Well, I think that if you expect people to raise up and be better, you have to be willing to invest in them. And that means an investment of, if you take 13 employees I have now and you take a half an hour, 30 minutes a day, and you do the math, how many hours of the day is that I'm giving up productivity to have them do personal training, right? Well, I'm not giving up, I'm gaining because of what I'm getting out of them.
Mm-hmm.
And we just had somebody who left, and he was in our shipping department, and he was with us for a year and a half. He had more certificates of training than anybody here. So I feel good that wherever he goes, he is going because we've bettered his life.
Mm-hmm.
People are going to come and they're going to go, and it's okay.
Yeah. That's incredible though that you make the time for them. I value that. I know that I'm not where I am if I didn't do the personal development work on my journey to where I am today. And every morning I wake up and I follow Brendan Burchard now. I'm part of his Growth Day app, and so every morning I got my daily fire going or one of his courses going, and that's what I work out to. But the one thing that I've been doing since the beginning of my journey is Toastmasters, and I've been a Toastmaster now for 6 years, and I'm very fortunate in that my chapter, we meet weekly. Not every chapter meets weekly. We meet weekly, and I still go to every meeting every week, and it's on Wednesdays at noon. And I bring that up because that's right in the middle of the workday, or that's some people's lunch hour, whatever you want to call it. But it's right in the middle of the workday. It interferes with the workday. But to your point, it has been so valuable in my life and has given me so much more than it's taken in that hour. Yes. And more than an hour, because of course I'm preparing my speeches, I'm preparing after, I'm giving feedback, I'm mentoring and helping and all these different things. But it's given me back so much more in the personal development space than I could have ever imagined when I joined. Yeah,
it becomes your non-negotiable, right? It's a non-negotiable.
Yeah.
And people who show up like that, I'm going to take this back to Mary Kay. I mean, this is back in the day, right? Mary Kay was just a brilliant trainer. And we used to have weekly meetings, and I did not miss a meeting. I never missed a meeting. And it's you could take it to AA or any other valuable thing, is that when you're down, you need those people around you.
Mm-hmm.
When you're up, they need you.
Mm.
So show up every week.
Mm.
If it's a weekly thing, if it's a daily thing, it's like working out at the gym, you need it, or those around you need you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's part of what we as humanity need to do for one another.
I love that outlook on you need them and they need you. It's so true. There's so many times that I've shown up to a Toastmaster meeting and I'm like, I just got out of maybe a tough one, or I have a tough meeting coming up, or whatever it was, but I'm still at Toastmasters, and there's something that happens in the meeting. Now, Toastmasters is very structured, where we have an agenda and everything, but there's always something that happens in the meeting where I'll go, oh, that might have brought me up from where I just came from, or it might have helped prepare me for the next meeting. So true in that down phase. And then in the up phase, it's the same thing of being able to go there and be able to perform and motivate and inspire. And then people come to me and afterwards and ask me, and I share with them. And my journey was, I have it recorded on my YouTube channel. I always talk about it. I say, because people will see me speak today and they're like, wow, so polished, this and that. And I appreciate the compliments and I still work hard at it. But I always say, go back to my YouTube channel, which was back in 2000, whatever it was, 16 or so. And my very first YouTube video, where it took me months to record that video, took me a long time to feel confident enough to actually get behind the camera and then post it. And you look at that video, you go, oh my goodness, he has traveled. Yeah.
But that's awesome, because that gives hope for the kid who's graduating or just gotten out of school.
That's right.
And says, I want to have a podcast. Well, those kids that do their research, they're going to see, you know what, you got to put a lot of crap out there before you get really good.
That's right. That's right. You got to put in the hard work. I want to go into lifestyle now a little bit, because you are at a high level. You have a large company. You're at a high level. You're operating at a very high level. And I think that, from the outside, people look and they go, how does, she must not have time to herself. But
I'm getting there. I'm not there.
But you do. What I think that you make that's important to you and you make a priority is you wake up early and you go for a walk with your husband, and you walk your dog. You also make time to play cards with your father, as you said earlier. I'm interested in your perspective on valuing life outside of work, and how, as entrepreneurs who their work is their passion and their baby, or at least view it that way, and how you're able to, you said it earlier, compartmentalize the business from lifestyle and making that an important part of your life as well.
Thanks for asking that one. How do I do it? Well, it goes back to non-negotiables, right? So I've been very blessed to fall in love again. And I have an amazing husband who's just a rock star. 30 years in the Marine Corps, and retired as a master gunnery sergeant. And, I love to travel, and it's funny because I asked him, do you like to travel? And he's like, I have been everywhere in the world that I wanted to go, and most places I never wanted to be. So no, I don't want to travel. Right. And I'm like, okay, so I need a travel buddy, if anybody knows. But other than that, we are like, he grounds me, and he's led 350 people at a time, and I don't have 350 people. So I can go home and I can unload on him, and he'll say, let's look at this from all angles, or I'll say, but I had a plan for that. And if it went awry, he'll always say, a plan is a great place to start when you need to deviate.
That's cool.
Right? Because we all need to pivot sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Depending on what we're facing, right? And he says, you have to be ready for anything and be willing to pivot away from it. And so a non-negotiable is I wake up at 5 o'clock every morning. My alarm goes off at 4:55, and then I negotiate my way out of bed
for 5 minutes.
Yeah, and then I'm up, and we get dressed, and out the door we go in the dark now, and we walk for 1.5 miles to 2 miles every morning, and several days a week I get right upstairs into the gym, and I do my weights and work out, because I'm getting older, and it's important to take care of you. You've got to, I have a coach that I'm working with right now who calls our body our soul chariot, right? And I love that, because we're in a human form, but it's really our soul, right? And my soul's getting a little older, so I need to take care of that chariot for sure. Um, and so that's a non-negotiable. And now that I am blessed to have my mom and dad near me all the time for whatever time I have, this is the cycle of life, and it's really in my face.
Mm.
I know that my mom said to me recently, she said, you don't have to stop by every day. And I said, yeah, Mom, I do. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me.
Mm.
I said, you can tell me not to come, but Dad won't ever tell me that.
Mm.
Right? Dad will never tell me not to come.
Mm.
So I go and I sit by his bed, and we've been watching the baseball games lately.
Mm.
Or I'll come in and he'll be watching a golf tournament, and I go, who's golfing? And he goes, I don't know. And I'm like, well, that was a really good hit, and we can talk and we can share, and then I'll ask him certain things, and I'll bring up a memory, and I'll say, Dad, remember when we used to go to the ballet together every year? And he says, yeah. And I go, that was my favorite. And he goes, it was one of my favorites, you know. And he doesn't readily come. His mind is sharp when he wants to be, but he doesn't readily come up with things. You have to kind of draw it out of him. And he used to be like I was a mirror of him, right? So imagine me in male form. That's my dad, like bigger than life and boisterous and loving and warm and all that. That was my dad. And people who know him now, like my husband's never known him that way. And he's so quiet. And I'm like, yeah, you don't know my dad.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like my dad, I think he's talked himself out.
Well, he's 90. So we're gonna give him some.
But that's my lesson to myself, though.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think, oh my God, I got a lot of words, in there, and someday I'm going to run out of them.
Yep. Yeah.
But you have to have some sort of balance, whatever that means to you. So take care of your physical sense. Have some non-negotiables. Maybe it's getting out of your office for lunch every day. I tend to eat at my desk, but I need to get out of my office and walk.
Mm-hmm.
I need to clear my mind. One day a month, one thing that I'm trying to implement now is one day a month I need to work away from the office.
Mm.
It gives me a fresh perspective, and it also allows me to realize that everybody is taking care of things and I can be away.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I love that idea.
Yeah, you have to have a perspective. You
Mm-hmm.
need a fresh perspective. And I think just believing in the people around me, giving them some levity and some leeway to be autonomous and work a deal. Oh, I just heard the sale gong. Somebody made a sale.
Oh,
we have a gong. We have a gong in our office. And I went, oh, okay, great.
I love that. Brings us back to what Brandon Dawson said. Celebrate the wins. I love that.
Celebrate.
I love everything that you're talking about in terms of, I think that it's like a respect for life, right? I think that when we think about our lives and why are we here, and of course our passion and what we're doing, and we know we focus a lot on the entrepreneur, but also our business executives out there and people just doing really wonderful things, and yeah, that's a passion, right? But it's also you're the driver behind it. You're the engine, and you got to take care of the engine. And I think that is your life and appreciating it and appreciating the people around you. And I love how you were able to bring that together for us of how you're able to do it for yourself and bring it back to your parents. And I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up this other parallel here for us as we move a little closer towards the other things that you're doing. But my grandmother, when she was in the assisted living, she had dementia and Alzheimer's, and didn't really know that I was coming. And I would go. She and I were very close. We have the same birthday, and she was my person. Oh. And in fact, I named my daughter after her, Denise. And I would go and visit her every week. And I remember her caretaker, Maureen, would say, Michael, you don't need to keep coming. And I would watch the Jets game and all the different things, sports with her. She wasn't even there watching it with me. I was just laying with her. And Maureen would say, you don't have to come. And I'd say, not really coming for her, I'm coming for me, and so another parallel for us. in all of that. I think it's just incredible how much in common we share. And this doesn't happen in every podcast. I'll say that much for sure.
I was going to ask you, does
No.
this happen to you
Not
often?
this
Yeah.
often. A couple little things every once in a while, like there's a few similarities, but there's a few things that I didn't even bring up that you were talking about that I was like, oh my goodness, same here. But I do want to get into what you do from a charitable standpoint, because when we first met in my IG Live and we talked, you brought up charity for charity. And I remember this beautiful concept or smart concept, really, of just going out and getting $100 from 100 people and raising 10,000. I was like, oh my goodness, mind blown by this. I thought that was just incredible.
Isn't that awesome?
And the more I've learned about you is how this charity plays such a deep role in your heart. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit more about it and the work that you do there.
Oh, I would love to. It's my charity, but it's not
Right.
my charity. I did not start it. I did not found it, but I am so a part of it. I've been a part of it for the last 16, 17 years. So I think we're in our 17th year, but it's called Charity for Charity. And you can find it at charity.org. And it was started by a woman named Charity Prestafilippo, she and her husband are local restaurateurs. And 17 years ago, she had a very close friend who had cancer and was in construction and had no health insurance. And Charity, being the giving, loving person that she is, said, I can help this person. And she gathered a group of people for a dinner and raised, I think it was $5,000. Somehow she raised this money. And the next year, a group of high school friends of hers, girls that she knew, they all pulled together and they created a board. And they were kind of the drivers behind it and said, we can do this and we can do it bigger. Let's do it and let's grant a wish for somebody else. And Charity for Charity was born with the idea that whenever there is a catastrophic illness, life-threatening illness, accident, usually you are so caught up in whatever that is that you don't allow yourself to have a wish or dream of something. And so she kind of took the best of Make-A-Wish and the Oscars and she's always been very starstruck. We tease her all the time. She's incredibly starstruck. She was an actress when she was young. She was in Gentle Ben, which is funny. But so she pulled it together, and every year this dinner got bigger and bigger until now it is an annual gala in our community that sells out at $150 a seat to 450 plus people every year. And we have this big gala, and we now grant wishes for an adult, a young adult, and a child.
Mm.
And then throughout the year, we do other fundraising events like the $10,000 day, and we'll grant smaller wishes, but we choose 3 beneficiaries every year. And because of my parents' illness, I have not been involved in the last several months. And the other day I went, oh my gosh, they just had this big event, and I reached out to them, and they're like, Laura, we miss you. And it's family. It's just family. We've granted some amazing wishes for some amazing people. And I happen to have, when I talk about life just throws you the unexpected, there's somebody who works for me now who just found out within the last 3 weeks that his wife's cancer is back. And it's now in her liver and her bones. And it's very, very life-threatening. So I got on Charity for Charity, and you can't do it when you're part of the board. And I'm not part of the board at the very moment because of my parents. I submitted a nomination, and I got a phone call yesterday that they selected his wife, and we're going to grant a wish for her, and she'll find out next Tuesday. So it's huge. You have to be part of your community. You have to give back, whatever your charity is. Make sure that the money goes to the people. There's so many charities that you should vet them out.
Mm.
But giving back is I get tenfold. I get back tenfold with whatever
Mm.
I give in time or money or anything. And my own wish is to be able to give that charity $100,000. That's my own wish.
Mm.
So I work towards that.
That's awesome. And I think, we go back to when you were talking about the kids and teaching them responsibility and service. It's, I think when you're giving back to different charities and working with different charities, it teaches not just your kids, of course, I bring them up as one of the examples, but also your employees and your team and your community. It shows them and it shows them how much value you put into others, and they in turn learn that to give value to others as well. So when we think about a sales team, if we want to show a sales team how to give value, show them how to give back to the community, and they're going to learn how to give value. And one other one that I can't, that I have to bring up as well, because we didn't get to talk about this at length, but your husband today's husband, he had a presidential award, which he claims everybody got, but as you made sure to find out, not everybody receives a presidential award, and so I'm sure that you donating to the veterans also is a very important place in your heart as well.
It is. It is. And, I just don't think there's enough gratitude for what these people have done for us in our country. And I'm so proud of him and who he is. But yeah, when we first moved in together, he spent one day putting a bunch of things up on the wall. And then very humbly, I was looking at it one day and realized that he had really was instrumental in saving a village in Iraq from the Taliban, and from that town being infiltrated by ISIS. And I just had this level of respect for him that just washed over me. And I said, wow, can I cuss on this show?
You could do whatever you want.
I said, oh my God, you're the shit. And he said, they give that to everybody. And I was just like, no, they don't. And then, of course, found out, no, they don't. And so, yeah, I give back to veterans when I can as well.
Yeah, I think it's so important, and I don't think that it's a political thing at all, and to get into, but they do so much for our country, and whether you agree with why or where they're going or what they're doing, it's the simple fact that we have these men and women who are willing to put themselves in harm's way for what they believe is helping us and helping our children and helping our legacy as a country. And so therefore, it's so important to give back to them and make sure that they're taken care of, because so often they have a tough time getting back. We all realize this with PTSD, and getting back even into the workplace and all sorts of other things that happen from just being away and at war and dealing with different health issues and everything. So very much appreciated. And then one other charity that you're also involved in is the Underground Railroad. And I think that this is also another, every charity is phenomenal and great, but all of them play a role in our hearts. And so this is another one that is important to you. And I'm also a little bit interested in this too.
Yeah. Well, I just really started getting giving to that one because of the child sex trafficking and the human sex trafficking that's going on, and was just riveted by the movie and know it to be true because I've actually had experiences with people here in Southern California that I know they're on the street, and I know that someone is pulling on their strings. I know that they're and I can't go into details of it, but I just know of a certain incident, and it just is heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking. And I think we need to become more and more aware of it. Children, people who say it's not really happening, are not really looking.
Well, I'll bring this up for you very simply in that we had Shamitria Gonzalez on the show, and she speaks about her entire experience of being sex trafficked and everything that happened from there. And she actually flew in from Texas to come meet me in person. To share her story, and so she shared her story. We even got to I toured her around Poughkeepsie a little bit so she could see the area. But the awareness of it is so important. She was 14 years old, and of course you can listen to her podcast episode here on the show. But she was 14 years old, and she thought she was being taken care of by the right people, and they misled her, and it was human sex trafficking. And I think awareness to this situation is very, very important. We're going to lighten it up a little bit now with your mantra and get into what you kind of live by. And you talked about the 3 Ps, which I want to make sure that everybody remembers, of getting rid of the 3 Ps, which are permanent, no problem is permanent; pervasive, you think it's affecting all areas of your life, it's not; and personal, it's not personal, which is something that you brought up earlier and I think is so important for everybody to hear. But I love this other one that you have here, is that behind every strong person is a story that gave them 2 choices: sink or swim. And what do you choose?
Oh, you got to swim.
That's
Keep
right.
swimming.
So
Keep swimming.
tell us about it.
Yeah. I love that. When I think about my life, and people ask me all the time, how is it you do what you do? Like the other thing that we didn't touch on was because we started with, when my husband had cancer, but I'm a cancer survivor as well.
Right.
We both had cancer in 2007. And people used to ask me all the time, oh my God, how do you get through this? And I said, how do you not get through it? What am I going to do? Stay in bed? I mean, and that's not to diminish anybody who goes through cancer or anything else, and they're so sick they can't get out of bed. But I'm just of the mindset that I have to do my part, right? I have to do my part. And so I think what makes my story, or any survivor's story, really great is that you have a point in your life where your choice is either sink or swim. I choose to swim.
Mm.
It's a choice.
Mm-hmm.
It is really a choice. And you see people that go through so many hardships, a catastrophic divorce. I know somebody who went through a catastrophic divorce, and honestly, she never recovered from it. And it was so sad to me, because I'm like, okay, well, is that going to be the story you write? That happened to you? Is that going to be the story that you leave? Is that the legacy you're going to leave for your children? That, oh, this happened to me? I choose to be a victor and not a victim.
Mm.
And I think that everything in life just really comes down to choices. It sounds like it's so easy, but it's not. We all battle with our own demons, but it can be a million different things. Mm-hmm. It's not, for me, it's not alcohol, but for some people it is. Mm-hmm. It could be food. It could be a divorce. But you choose if you're going to become a victor over it, or you're going to become a victim of it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And it's just like somebody who was sex trafficked, right? She could be, and she was victimized, but look at how she's become victorious over it.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Shamitria's story and becoming victorious over it is tremendous. She went through the entire story from start to finish with me. And she, as you said, may have been victimized, but she was never a victim. She was always able to overcome it. Just keep swimming. Of course, the movie with Dory, just keep swimming, just keep swimming. It's so true. As long as you keep trying. I just had this conversation with my daughter, actually, with Tenley the other night. She was doing her sight word list with me, and she was on the second page. And I have a feeling that she has, and I hope that she doesn't, but I'm dyslexic, and I have a feeling that she has a little bit of it as well. And so when she was going to her sight words, by the time we got to the third page, she was done. She didn't want to try anymore. She was done. And that's what I noticed with myself, that's why I don't read a book. I listen to the book because by the third page, I'm pretty much done. I'm checked out. It's too challenging to continue reading. So she was having trouble, and we got into a little bit of me trying to get her to do it and whatever. And at the end of it, she thought I was frustrated with her because she didn't know the word. And I told her, I said, I'm not frustrated with you because you don't know the word. I don't care that you don't know the word. I care that you stopped trying. As long as you're trying, I'm going to help you. As long as you're trying, someone will help you. As long as you're trying, people will see that you're trying and they will help you. But once you stop trying, once you give up, it's over. No one's going to help you.
Right. And they will forget that you were ever trying.
Right.
Because they don't see the struggle anymore.
Right. So,
I love that.
So I love that. Just keep swimming, right? I have to bring it back to the beginning because I was so curious about this and I forgot about it, but you reminded me for some reason. Something just reminded me. What is the movie that your sister said that your family resembles? Do you remember?
Okay. And I have a hard stop here in a couple of minutes. So if you don't mind, I have a staff meeting. So
no, you're good.
It's been great. Let's see.
Looking
it up. I'm looking it up because I asked my sister yesterday to please text it to me so I don't forget.
So
hello, God, are you there? It's me, Margaret.
Hello, God, are you there? It's me, Margaret. And as we conclude, so this is the end of the show. I want to make sure that everybody knows where to find you and where to contact you if they need to. So if you could just share, and of course, this will all be in the show notes for everybody who's finding it on wherever they're finding it, Spotify, iTunes, iHeart, wherever you are. But if you could, for our audio listeners, any handles, any websites that you would like to share.
This has been so fun, Michael. Let me just tell you that I've been on, I don't know how many podcasts now, and it's been fun. This has been one of the best. And there is a thread that runs through our lives that we're going to explore further. So I love that. And I owe you dinner. So where can people find me? They can usually find me here at Tourmaline Enterprises, but you can find me at Lori Raymond, CEO @gmail.com.
Awesome. Lori Raymond, CEO
Lori Raymond, CEO.com.
.com. Gotcha.
Yes. Or you can look me up at Tourmaline Enterprises. That's TOURMALINE enterprises.com.
Fantastic.
And it's Lori, LORI.
LORI.
Yep.
Fantastic. This has been such a fun show. We're well over 2 hours. Like this is, I have a 1:30 also, and I'm just like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. I'm already late. There we go. I didn't even look at the time, but this has been amazing. I want to thank you so much for coming on, and we will certainly be in touch.
Thank you so much, Michael. Have a wonderful day.
Awesome. Bye, Lori.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you for listening to The Michael Esposito Show. For show notes, video clips, and more episodes, go to michaelespositoinc.com/podcast. Thank you again to our sponsor, Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. That's DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den 10, you're giving back on a global scale. This episode was produced by Uncle Mike at the iHeart Studios in Poughkeepsie. Special thanks to Lara Rodrian for the opportunity and my team at Michael Esposito Inc.